All right, it seems like we're live. Um, Welcome to my first ever episode of the God Life Mentor podcast. And today's episode, we're going to be diving into the origins of the God Life with the God Life story. So if you're tuning in, watching this here in the live Facebook group or on the replay, then yeah, you can comment along and watch this live. But if you're listening into this on a recording, whether it's Spotify, Instagram, any of these places that I put it on, then yeah, sit back, maybe grab a tea, coffee, and listen in because apparently I've got a very soothing, calming voice. And my approach on this podcast is going to be in just really sharing from my heart what's been my genuine story and my journey here. So for the longest time, I've actually been asked by quite a few people for me to launch a podcast, and funnily enough, I've practiced it many times over before in the past with my friends and just other people that have supported me in my journey as an entrepreneur. But now I've actually finally decided that I am going to fully launch this podcast since I'm very clear on who I am right now, and also what my authentic message and brand wants to be. For a while, I've kind of struggled in understanding what that is, but now it's very clear to me that this is my unique message that I really want to put out there and share to the world. So it's my first ever podcast over here, and how I wanted to start it off was just by going back to the beginning and really sharing with you the story of how it came about with the God Life. And I guess the best way to start that off would be to share my own personal story, and then I'll take you to how the God Life was actually formed in the beginning. So for myself, my name is Muhammad Adam Ali right now, but I wasn't born like that. I was actually born with the name of Muhammad Adam Aslam. And the reason why is because my parents who gave birth to me, they came from two different worlds. If you want to call it Romeo and Juliet, like maybe it was like that, because the parents of my parents didn't actually agree on the marriage and them coming together because they were from two different worlds. But my parents fell in love because of their mutual love for sports. So they found each other in the mental health hospital. And it was there that my mother was like really into her racket sports, especially. And my dad and her would play sports together just as friends, like in the beginning. And my mum would always wipe the floor with him. So that was something that was unfamiliar to my father because he was so used to being the Bruce Lee character that everybody would describe him as being. And he was a almost professional boxer as well, played all the different sports that he possibly could. And now there was this woman coming in beating him in a sport. Like it was quite new for him, but he liked it. They formed a bond, started traveling together, and got together. But like I said, once they actually did want to get married, then it became a thing where it was like it went from being this joke almost to, oh, this is now serious. So they ended up getting married, but like as they did, my grandfather, I remember he didn't even attend the wedding because he was so against the entire idea. So what ended up happening was they formed a pack, and my mother and father decided that they were going to make sure that whoever was going to look at their marriage was going to be able to say in the future that that was a good decision because they wanted to prove everybody wrong essentially and prove themselves right, that it was for the right reasons. So they ended up deciding that they were going to have children, and not only have children, but when they have those children, make sure that those children were brought up and were respected. So one of the reasons as to why like my grandfather never attended the wedding was because my family were from two different worlds. Like I was saying, my parents, my mum was and is Jamaican and from a Christian background, whereas my dad is Pakistani and he's from a Islamic upbringing. So the two worlds coming together, my grandfather, like especially, wasn't accepting of that. And like I said, my parents were deciding that they were going to go and make something from the kids that they had, and show that this was not a mistake. So initially they had my oldest sister. Her name is Yasmin, and when she was born, she basically got a ton of love and admiration. And my parents did the absolute best that they could with her to make sure that she was a high achiever. So my mum focused on, they kind of like did a split in roles. My mum focused on making sure that academically she was going to excel. And then my dad kind of focused on two things with her, which was one, giving her the sports, and maybe my mum helped a little bit with that as well. But a lot of what my dad gave specifically was with the religion. So he taught her a lot about Islam, the Quran, and things like this, because my mum converted to Islam once they got married. So that was the main religion that was in the household. So yeah, basically there was this new um, family that they started to raise, and my sister had started to really make my parents proud by the fact that she was achieving high grades in school and she was doing amazing with her Islamic studies and things like that. Um, and it was working well. But then my parents decided that we're going to have another child again. So that's where I came in, and I was the second child. But you know, coming in and being almost compared to the elder child, what it meant for me was that I had big shoes to fill because she did such a great job. She ended up like becoming a Hafiz of Quran, meaning she memorized the entire thing. She was top student in her entire primary school, secondary school, maybe even university, and yeah, just like broke every single record, became a doctor. But there was myself who was the middle child, and I do believe that I almost suffered from the middle child syndrome as well because I was being compared to my older sibling. But I remember as soon as I was born, one of the things my parents have told me is that like my grandfather from that point on, that's when he came back into our lives. So yeah, like I did pretty well academically. I did okay. But my main focus was in sports, and that's where I did my best to prove to myself that I was just as good as my sister. But I always had this lingering belief within me, which was like I'm not good enough. I'm not enough, and that was really difficult for me to overcome because yeah, like I basically had a lot of um, ambition that came from that. Like I wanted to make sure that I was going to be super successful because I just wanted to make my mother and father proud. Like that was the main thing. I wanted them to be able to say to me that son, you are enough and you're just as good as your sister. You don't have anything to prove. Like we love you just as you are. But I never really got that validation as a child. So I kept on trying to prove it again and again and again in sports, and I did really well. Like I got to play badminton at a county level, national level. I was number one in the county, and then was also playing further on. But I remember like sometimes coming second in tournaments and feeling like, yeah, I'm still not good enough. Like I need to get to the highest level, or winning a county tournament and feeling like, yeah, I'm not good enough. I need to go nationals. It was just, yeah, it was like a disease almost. So I played badminton, then I started to get into tennis. And again, played that county national level, was even offered a scholarship to go to America and play out there as well. And I played basketball at national level too. Like we won some national championships in basketball. So that's kind of like my upbringing and my childhood. And the biggest difficulty that I'm talking about there is yeah, just really dealing with this belief internally of not being good enough. And then as I transitioned into my adult life, I then went into the working world. So I got my career start as an accountant, and I didn't really want to do it. It was just literally the first job that I came across that was going to allow me to make money, because I was like, well, if I can't go to America for the scholarship, which was unfortunate circumstances, then I was like, I need to prove my worth some other way. If it's not going to be through sports, it's going to be through making money. And all I knew as a way to make money was from seeing what my parents did, which was going and getting a job. None of them had really ever shown me that they had entrepreneurial experience and business experience or anything like that. So I just followed in my parents' footsteps, got myself a job working 9 to 5, but I absolutely hated it from day one. I remember it was horrible, truly. A nightmare for me personally, going on that first day, being surrounded by like people who were almost 5 times my age. Maybe not that old, but double or triple my age. Like that's how it felt. And I was just with them, like, trying to make sure that I could get through the day. I was just clock watching and not actually caring whatsoever about the work that I was doing, because it wasn't in alignment with what my actual mission, purpose, values, and vision was. So nobody ever really led me down a path where I was completely certain that this is where I'm going to get the most amount of success and fulfillment from. And because I didn't have that older brother, older sister that was guiding me, like I did ask my sister, what do you think I should do? She basically said, like, just, I don't know, pick chemistry and like whatever it is that is going to give you the highest likelihood of getting a decent position at university. I never even went to university, but I did some subjects at A level that just didn't make any sense whatsoever. So I didn't want to continue following her advice, because another reason is that as much as she was a high achiever, I saw that she didn't necessarily fully enjoy everything that she did, and I didn't want to be in the same position as somebody who didn't actually love what they do. I wanted, for me personally, to love what I did. So I didn't have that older person to guide me in the direction of where I needed to go. And because of that, I was in this job feeling unfulfilled, feeling stuck, not knowing what I should do moving forwards. And after being in that job for quite some time, I started to look elsewhere and started to look online, because my life was just getting worse and worse and worse. And I feel like during this time as well, because since I was younger, I was definitely a firm believer in God. I was a practicing Muslim as well. And as I started to lose trust with my religion, but not also the religion, but my parents and just the people who were telling me that this is how you should live, this is what you should do. I started to lose trust and kind of threw out the baby with the bathwater as well, is the best way to describe what happened. So I'd say lost my connection with God, and I just lived a life believing that it didn't really exist or anything like that, almost as an atheist. And because of that, I just went down a darker path, I would say, and went all the way down as far as I possibly could, just because I didn't necessarily want to, didn't want to live a life that was actually beneficial to me. Like I was almost self-hating is the best way you can describe it, because again, like I guess this lingering belief of not being enough was taking over, and it led me to um, act out what I was believing internally. So yeah, I went down a darker path, surrounded myself with a friendship group of people who were also on these similar habits and things like that. But I think it's something that we all kind of go through as younger people when we're in our teens and adolescence and things like this. And we kind of mask it by saying, yeah, we're just having lots of fun, and you only live once, and you, um, you know, don't need to sweat it or anything like this. But we don't actually realize the damage that it's potentially doing to us. And I personally didn't realize like how much damage that this was doing to us and the impact of this until we got a phone call one time from my friends that basically said to look into a group chat because one of my best friends who I really connected with on a spiritual level, I would say on a soul level, um, we got a call basically saying that the university told us this guy killed himself, like he'd committed suicide. So that for me was like a huge wake up call. That was one of the line in the sand moments, the turning moments in my life where I was like, yeah, this is not a joke. Like life, as much as it's something where we want to have fun and enjoy ourselves, like it's not something that we take for granted. And I realized that when I was about 20, 21 years old. And then after that, I literally made a firm decision that I'm never going to allow that to happen for myself and self destruct in that way, as long as I'm consciously aware of what I'm doing. But also, I'm going to make sure that any person in my group, in my circle, if they're in my circle, like they're going to be taken care of. Like they can rely on me to be there for them when they need me, type of thing. So yeah, like that completely shifted things for me. And kind of going back to what I was saying about being in this job, like I couldn't be in a job forever for the rest of my life if it was making me miserable, making me depressed. Certainly not a job that I hated. So I started to look alternatively, and my thinking back then was like, it's the 21st century. Why would I be not looking online and seeing what's available there? So I started getting like some emails from this guy called Tai Lopez, and he basically was sending out a lot of emails that were talking about how I could potentially build like a business these days on social media, and it would be really easy. He broke down the numbers. You just need 2 or 3 clients, high ticket clients, target business owners, and you're set. Like you can go ahead and take a few videos for them and you've got a retainer. So I started to invest into his programs and courses, and I did learn a lot. Like it actually opened my eyes and made me realize how simple the game was online. And after that, I was like, this is what I want to focus my time and attention on. So I stopped treating my job so seriously. I ended up getting fired from that job. And it just gave me, it was one of the biggest blessings I ever had, because it gave me about 2, 3 weeks where all I had to do was like go to the gym, come back home, and then study this online business course and then implement it as much as I possibly could. But back then, there was still, I'd say, this lingering limiting belief within me because I hadn't done the mindset work that said that you're not good enough. So I didn't actually really go and implement. I knew everything in my head, but I never went and executed. So yeah, fast forward from there, like because of this belief and this limiting belief internally for me, um, rather than actually going and executing in business, I went and started to go into different business opportunities, whether it was drop shipping, affiliate marketing. I tested out loads of different ones in what they were teaching, but never in actually testing them through execution. And it was just like this never ending cycle almost where I kept on doing this again and again and again, until I found like one opportunity that really resonated with me. And it's the same opportunity that I have stuck with since I found it, because I could see not only the long-term potential, but it was also so much in alignment with my personal vision, mission, and values. So that's something that I'll talk about on another episode 100%, and how it's personally transformed my life. But after coming into that opportunity, even then, in the beginning, when I knew 100% in my heart, like, this is the one that I'm going to stick with, this is the one that I'm married to. Even then, like, for the entire first year, I remember spending 90% of my time literally with my head in books and in content and in courses, because I never felt like I was enough and good enough to go out there and start doing the work myself and start generating leads, or start posting content and start building my brand, or start, getting on sales calls and doing all the work that would actually bring me in profits and revenue. Like, I never did any of it really. So I just productively procrastinated. And yeah, by the end of that, like, I gained a lot of knowledge. And it was only when I went to an event to meet one of my mentors, Balazs W. Cardos, who, he basically pulled me out as this 8-figure entrepreneur and said, like, you've got a ton of knowledge, but it's not doing anything for you. You haven't actually applied the knowledge, because knowledge is not power. What is true power is applied knowledge. And I was like, damn, you literally simplified it for me. It's true. But again, I was like, as much as I know that what you're speaking about is real, I still had that, limiting belief behind the surface that was the reason for why I wasn't actually taking action. So that was like the beginnings of my journey. I did a ton of personal development, a lot more than most people would. I spent so much money not on just these courses and programs, but also coaches, thousands of pounds, because I wanted to fix me. I wanted to make myself feel like I was good enough. And it just became this like personal development loop, never ending, because all I needed to really do was make this shift. And I never did that. So this is where it's getting to the beginnings of the actual God life and how I came up with this, because one of the main causes that, and by the way, as much as I'm saying like the courses were almost like drugs to me, I did gain a ton of knowledge and value that I have with me for the rest of my life. There was a quote that did stick with me, which is a formal education can make you a living, but a self-education can make you a fortune. And I had a massive self-education like the first couple of years. I studied like a freaking professor in the area of business. And one of the guys that I studied was a guy called Cole Gordon. And that's one of the reasons for why I've been able to build my business to the level that I have, which has done multiple six figures. But the thing that was about Cole Gordon's content as much meat that there was in there, it was one specific message that was given, not even necessarily by him, but actually by one of his mentors called Todd Brown. And the main concept that he taught within that course and that that academy, whatever you want to call it, it was this idea of something called a unique mechanism. So if you don't know what a unique mechanism is, it's essentially something that will separate you from your audience and your market, not necessarily by the differentiator of the features of your product or the product itself, but the way that you can differentiate yourself is by the method of how you do what you do. So let's say, for example, right now, like, there is the market of personal trainers where there are just so much competition, to the point where, like, I was a personal trainer as well at some point, by the way. I kind of missed it out in the story. But there are so many personal trainers that when I went into that particular niche, or that industry, should I say, it was difficult for me to find a niche because they were all already taken. Like calisthenics, people are already doing that. You know, high intensity interval training. So many people do that. There was bodybuilding, like so many people do it. So the key to being able to really um, create a monopoly, even within the fitness industry, is by reinventing a new method and coming up with something that is new. So I remember, for example, when I was a lot younger, like 14, 15, I used to get these television commercials come on the TV in the morning by a guy called Shaun T. You might remember him as well. He's the guy that created the Insanity program. And the whole thing with that was like, it was just high intensity interval training, but he added his own twist into it, which then made it the Insanity program. It's the same thing with like P90X. That's another one where it's a name to a method that's been invented, where it could be a combination of a few things or just a little bit of your personality that's added to it. So yeah, like I started to study this idea of the unique mechanism. It was blowing my mind. I was like, wow, this is so incredibly simple as to how I can go and put myself out there into the space that I wanted to be involved in, which was the life transformation space. Like I started off, like I said, as a personal trainer, which was helping people to physically transform. And it just made sense because I was already in sports. But then I realized like a lot of people who were being trained by me, they didn't necessarily just need the coaching in how to use weights in the gym, but really what they needed was either motivation, internal motivation, inspiration, or they needed some type of mindset shift that would help them to go and do the work themselves. So then I started to go into like learning how to become a coach. I became a coach as well, like a life coach. And I wanted to be able to transform people's lives. Like that was the biggest thing for me that was driving me forwards. So, yeah, in terms of my life transformation, I was like, well, there's so many life coaches, like personal trainers, coaches out there, things like that. How can I differentiate myself? Um, and as I was asking myself these questions, it was kind of crazy because I remember whilst I was studying this Core Gordon course and program, I had one of my friends, one of my best friends, I should say, Luke. He was in my house with me that day, and I was sharing it with him, like as I was studying it, going into the kitchen, sharing what I'd learned, and just being so excited to tell him like I've figured it out, like I know exactly what I'm gonna do to separate myself, build out my brand. Because yeah, I remember being on social media and thinking, I just feel like I sound like everybody else right now. There's nothing about me that's unique. I don't feel like I'm sharing authentically. And that was a big block for me in going on social media and putting out content, making my own courses, making my own programs, things like that. I just didn't want to make something that somebody could copy or find elsewhere. So yeah, I got so excited. I was telling Luke, um, you got to look at this unique mechanism stuff. It's incredible. And then out of nowhere, the next day, I was having this little bit of a back and forth with Luke, this mastermind. And um, I remember for a while, like I was reflecting on my personal story and um, kind of if I was to take it a few steps back, actually, that same event that I was talking about that I went to with where Balaj was there, and he gave me that talking to about me not applying what I'd learned. At that same event, I remember the guys who were on stage that now have one of the biggest coaching platforms in the world, I believe. They were talking about, their whole message was around your adversity becoming your asset. And I don't think it really registered when they said it at that point. It was just one of those things that I felt that was real, that it was true, and there was value within it. But I never really took it and did something with it because I was so early on in my journey, and there were so many things that I was learning back then that I was attempting to implement, and it just wasn't one of the things that I took. But I kept it with me for many, many years, which is why, like I said, all the books and all the courses and all the content that I have digested and taken in, I have to say that it's all been super valuable for me to receive, because you keep it. You never lose that. When you make an investment into yourself, like, it's literally there with you forever. It's the best investment that you can make, which is why even Warren Buffett says that too. So I had this thing in my mind, which was your adversity becomes your asset. So as I was thinking about, like, and I wasn't even, when I was thinking about my unique mechanism, by the way, like, it was a process where I wasn't necessarily even thinking about so consciously, like with hard thought, like I'm trying to force this out. It was just, it flowed effortlessly as it came out. So, as I was kind of reflecting on what my unique mechanism could be, I realized that, yeah, this is actually pretty easy, because I've been through such adversity, such a struggle in my journey. And what really was that struggle, if I was to sum it up? A big part of it was, number one, like, not actually being in alignment with my life's purpose, and not even acting within it, right? So I was acting in somebody else's purpose and doing somebody else, contributing to somebody else's dream and vision that I didn't care about. So that was number one thing. Number two thing was that I was having like a lot of, what's the best way to put it? Low commitment engagements with people and opportunities. So I remember back then, as young boys, especially as young guys, like, what would be rewarded would be, and not just rewarded but admired, would be when you would have a engagement, an interaction with someone, something, or an opportunity, and you would be respected for going into something with the lowest commitment and getting the most out from that. And that was my mindset as well. It was, how can I put in the least to get out the most? Which I totally understand that as well, by the way, that mentality and that mindset. But fundamentally, what I realized after gaining my mentorship and experience is that that's truly an employee mindset. Because when I think about, what I was more so like as an athlete, which I'd say is more synonymous to an entrepreneur, is I was a lot more of the mentality of, how can I give the most because I want to, because I enjoy this, because I'm passionate about this, because I'm enthusiastic about it. How can I give more to this? How can I spend more time on the court? Like, that was my mentality and my mindset. But then as I came out of alignment, it was more the employee mindset, thinking, what can I do to put in the minimum? What's the lowest commitment? And things like that. And yeah, my best analogy that I can give to kind of summarize that, it was almost as if I was having a lot of casual sex or casual relationships in these opportunities, which was unlike what I really wanted and what most people probably want. And that's a long-term sustainable relationship with somebody who is a life partner, and they're on the same goal and missions trajectory together as king and queen, right? That's most likely what most people want, but probably don't feel like they're good enough to go and have it. So that was one of my biggest problems. And from those two things, that's when I'd say, having that awareness as to what my biggest mistakes were, I was then able to articulate this to Luke. And in this mastermind, like, he was just literally acting as a soundboard for me to be able to simplify and almost teach myself what were the biggest lessons that I needed to overcome through my personal journey. And I believe that that's the extraction of wisdom. See, there's a story that talks about how there was a guy who basically had a vase and he bought this vase for like, £10 or something like that. He ends up dropping the vase. When he drops the vase, it shatters into a million pieces. And after it shatters into a million pieces, another guy comes in as he's picking it up and about to throw it into the trash and says, "What are you doing? Like, that's a good vase that you've got there. Don't just throw it away." And he's like, "Okay, cool. Well, if you don't want me to throw it away, then you take it." So the guy takes it off his hands. Once he takes it off, he spends like a day gluing it all back together. And then the story goes that he actually is able to sell the vase for a lot more than he paid for it in the beginning. The original guy, he sells it for like £1 million. And the reason why he was able to do this is because when he glued it back together, what he did is he glued it back together with liquid gold. So the powerful thing about the story and the message here is that the gold is not in the perfection, but the gold is in the cracks. And that's where the wisdom lies. And for me personally, I didn't even recognize and realize it, but I had so much gold in my cracks. And then going through this process with Luke was me basically discovering where my gold was and what my gold was. So I believe that in life, we all get given lessons and we can't avoid that, every single one of us. But it is our choice as to whether or not we decide that we are going to learn our lessons or whether we want to learn new ones. Because if you learn your lesson, then you get a new one. But if you don't learn your lesson, you constantly get given the same challenge and test, and you have to repeat that lesson in learning that. So, yeah, this is what was my personal experience. I was basically learning these lessons in real time from my past with Luke. And as I was doing that, it was like everything just flowed effortlessly through me because the best way I can describe it was almost as if I surrendered my vessel, and it was like God was just speaking through me to Luke, because a lot of the things that I was coming to the realization of, I never even understood before, never mind articulate, and it was happening at the same time. And then I was basically able to simplify my whole life's lessons into this one blueprint, this one method, this one life hack almost. It was from a whole day's worth of masterminding, simplified a lifetime's worth of wisdom into just 7 different keys that I now call the 7 keys of truth too. And the name The God Life as well came from about a couple of hours of me walking up and down with Luke and figuring out like what should the name be to this life. Should it be, I don't know, like I can't even remember some of the names we came up with. But The God Life was just like the one. Once I had that come, I was like, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds really good. So yeah, that's the story of how I actually came up with The God Life, literally from the beginning, and the process as to how it actually happened with Luke as well. And it was all in that same day that I came up with the 7 keys of truth, the 9 tenets. These are things that I'm going to be sharing with you on some of the next episodes as well. But this is just an introductory one. And if you've liked this one, then please go ahead and subscribe to this podcast, because it is going to be as following on from each episode to the next. And we're going to make them as best as we possibly can every single week for the foreseeable future. There's so much that I have to share, in the actual God Life program. And I would hands down say it's like the most valuable piece of life tools that I've actually been given to my personal disposal, because these are things that I needed for myself and still to this day stick to, utilize in my life. And I've found as well that if I move away from the tenets of the God life or the keys, my life gets worse. I've tested it. Sometimes it's like I just decided that, yeah, why not just slip back or go ahead with what somebody else has said, that is out of accordance with the keys or the tenets. And as I've done that, my life literally got worse. So hands down, I can say that this has been the best tools that I've ever given or been given. And a lot of the people who have gone through like my God Life program have said a similar thing too. So I'm really looking forward to being able to share more about this with you on the next episode as well of the God Life Mentor, because I am the one who created this and invented this. So it's best coming from me, the source. But I guarantee you this, like, other people will start to be teaching the 7 keys and the 9 tenets and things like that to others, because it's, yeah, it's that good in terms of how well it works. So thank you for tuning in to this one and listening to my origin story. And I look forward to next time speaking with you again and having another conversation. So from me to you, thank you for listening. Peace and love. And we'll see you next time on the God Life Mentor podcast.